I really thought I had everything under control 6 months before what was supposed to be my perfect wedding day. Jeff and I were sitting across from each other at this cozy little Italian place we'd been going to since we started dating. The red checkered tablecloth, the smell of garlic and basil, the soft hum of conversation. It all should have felt romantic, but instead, it felt like a business meeting. We were sorting through vendor contracts and seating charts like we were planning some corporate event instead of celebrating our love. Jeff was being his usual obsessive self, questioning every expense, double-checking every number, going over every little detail twice, sometimes 3 times. He even asked if the florist could itemize the centerpieces as if we were auditing a company. I remember rolling my eyes quietly, sipping my wine and saying, "Jeff, it's just flowers, not a financial report." He didn't even look up from his tablet when he replied, "It's not about flowers, Tiffany. It's about making sure we don't get ripped off." His tone was calm but clipped, the kind that said he thought he was being rational while actually driving me insane. Sometimes his need to micromanage every single thing made me want to lose my mind. But I stayed quiet because wedding planning was already stressful enough without dealing with his control issues. That's when I decided to mention Vegas. I'd been planning this trip with William for months. It wasn't a secret exactly, I just hadn't told Jeff yet because I knew what he'd do. He'd turn it into some big dramatic production when it really wasn't a big deal. William and I had been taking these little trips together since college. It was our thing. So between sips of wine I said lightly, "Oh, by the way, I'll be in Vegas next month. William and I booked it weeks ago." Jeff's fork froze halfway to his mouth. He blinked at me like he hadn't heard me correctly. "Just you and William?" he asked slowly. "Yeah," I said, pretending not to notice the shift in his expression. "It's kind of a tradition. We've been doing these trips for years. Just a week, nothing crazy." He set his fork down, jaw tightening. "So you're going to Vegas with him for a week?" "Jeff, come on," I said, forcing a laugh. "William's basically family. You know that. We've been friends forever." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Family doesn't usually include a guy you almost hooked up with in Cancun." That stung, but I kept my tone even. That was years ago. We were kids. It was a stupid spring break moment after too many drinks. We've both moved past it. "I'm marrying you, remember?" He leaned back, arms crossed, eyes narrowing slightly. "How would you feel if I went on a week-long trip with just one woman? No group, no guys, just her and me?" I shook my head, trying not to lose my patience. "That's not the same thing, Jeff." "Isn't it?" he asked quietly. "Yes, it's different," I said, exasperated. "Because I trust you. I wouldn't freak out if you wanted to spend time with a friend. I don't need to control who you talk to or travel with." He gave me that look, the one that said he thought he was being logical and I was being naive. "It's not about control, Tiffany. It's about respect. There are boundaries. And I'm respecting you by being honest," I replied sharply. "That's why I told you now, instead of you finding out later and thinking I was hiding something." The air between us grew heavy. I could feel people at nearby tables talking, laughing, enjoying their meals, while we sat there locked in silent tension. Look, I get that some people might think a week in Vegas with a male friend crosses some invisible line, but those people don't understand real friendship. William and I had been through everything together: college stress, family drama, career changes, relationship problems. He was the one person who truly understood me, who didn't judge me or try to change me. William just got me. I could tell him anything, every insecurity, every frustration, and he never tried to fix it or lecture me. He'd listen, nod, and then make some sarcastic joke that made everything feel lighter. Jeff was great in his own way, sure, but he was always trying to fix things. Always analyzing, planning, controlling. If I said I was stressed, he'd immediately turn it into a problem-solving session instead of just hearing me out. Sometimes I just needed someone who'd let me breathe, who'd say, "Yeah, that sucks," instead of, "Here's what we should do about it." By the end of that dinner, I was done pretending everything was fine. I'd reached my limit with his constant need to manage me. I pushed my plate away and said, "You know what, Jeff? Either deal with it or don't. The trip's happening. William already took time off work, everything's booked, and I'm not canceling just because you have trust issues." He stared at me across the table, silent for a moment, eyes flat, calculating. Then he smiled, that kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and said, "Have fun." His tone was light, almost pleasant, but something about it made my stomach twist. I should have recognized it. It was the same tone he used when he was pretending not to be angry, when he was plotting his next move. But I was too relieved that he'd dropped the argument to care. The next morning he was different. Too cheerful. Too calm. It was like someone had swapped him out overnight. He was already up, making coffee, humming under his breath while scrolling through his phone. "Wow," I said, raising an eyebrow. "You're in a good mood. What's going on?" He looked up with a smile that seemed a little too bright. "Just thinking about planning my bachelor party," he said casually. I nodded, almost impressed. "Good for you. Finally embracing the fun side of wedding planning." "Yeah," he replied, turning back to his phone. "Thought it'd be good to do something that week. Keep myself busy while you're gone." It seemed reasonable enough. I told myself it was a healthy sign, him doing his own thing, not sulking. But as the day went on, the details started coming out, and I realized Jeff wasn't being mature. He was being petty. Later that afternoon, William called, his voice tight and uneasy. "Did you know Jeff's planning his bachelor party the same week as our Vegas trip?" he asked. "What? No," I said, frowning. "That's convenient, I guess." "Yeah, convenient," he repeated, but there was an edge to his tone. He, mentioned inviting Mira. That made my blood run cold. Mira. Of course. The same Mira who had a crush on Jeff back in college. The same one who dated William and still managed to make catty comments about me at every social gathering. When I hung up, I could practically feel my pulse in my temples. Jeff wasn't being spontaneous, he was being strategic. Using Mira to make William uncomfortable. Trying to turn our harmless trip into some moral comparison game. That evening when he got home, I didn't wait. I crossed my arms and said, "So, you're inviting Mira to your bachelor party?" He didn't even look surprised. "Yeah," he said lightly. "She's just a friend." I laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "Just a friend? Really, Jeff? You think I don't see what you're doing?" He tilted his head, eyes glinting. "She's practically like a sister." The way he was twisting everything, making it seem like our situations were somehow equal when they clearly weren't, showed me a side of Jeff I'd never seen before. There was this cold, calculating edge to him, manipulative in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't the hurt, heartbroken fiancé I'd expected. It was someone enjoying the control, savoring it. What really got to me was that he wasn't even upset anymore. He was entertained. It was like watching someone play a game they knew they were winning. Every text, every smug little post on social media about epic bachelor parties and amazing friends was just bait, little hooks thrown into the water to see who would bite first. Meanwhile, William was falling apart. He called constantly, his voice tight with panic, saying things like, "You have to talk to him, Tiffany. He's out of control. He's actually inviting Mira. What's wrong with him?" I tried to calm him down, but honestly, I was too angry to play mediator. I couldn't believe Jeff was turning what should have been a private issue into some bizarre social experiment. It was pathetic, honestly. Like watching a grown man throw a tantrum because he couldn't stand not being the one in control. And the thing is, Jeff had always been jealous of my friendship with William. I used to laugh it off when he'd say things like, "Funny how William always texts you when we're together," or, "You light up more when you talk about your trips with him than when you talk about us." He'd smile when he said it, but there was always this bitterness just underneath. Instead of admitting he felt insecure, he'd twist it into guilt, into rules, into ways to make me feel like I was doing something wrong. That's what this whole thing was. One big performance meant to put me in my place. And now, watching it unfold, I finally understood the kind of man I was about to marry. Someone who couldn't deal with his emotions like an adult, only through manipulation and ego games. When William and I showed up at Jeff's place for what was supposed to be a calm conversation, I could tell the second I walked in that he'd been planning this moment. The living room was too neat, the lighting too deliberate. He had drinks ready, whiskey poured, glasses aligned, and that fake, polite smile plastered across his face. The kind of smile that said, "I've already won." "Glad you could make it," he said smoothly, gesturing toward the couch. "Thought we should clear the air before things get out of hand." William looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. His shoulders were tense, his eyes darting between us. He muttered a quick, "Yeah, sure," and sat down stiffly, keeping his hands clasped like a schoolboy waiting for detention to start. Jeff took his time, sipping his drink before launching into his performance. "Let's look at this logically," he said, his voice even and measured, like he was opening statements in court. "Tiffany's going to Vegas with a male friend for a week. I plan a trip the same week, invite a female friend. Same scenario, right?" "It's not the same," I snapped before I could stop myself. He tilted his head, all fake curiosity. "Isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks identical." "Except it's not identical," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're doing this to get a reaction. I'm going because I already made plans with my friend." He smiled slightly, turning to William. "William, you agree it's not the same, right?" William hesitated, rubbing his palms together. I just think, maybe this is getting blown out of proportion. Oh, so it's blown out of proportion when it's my plans? Jeff cut in sharply, but not when it's Tiffany's? Jeff, I said, my patience slipping, you're twisting everything just to make your point. He leaned forward, eyes bright with that cold amusement. No, I'm just trying to understand your logic. You say trust is everything. So if you trust William and William trusts me, what's the issue? I could feel my pulse quicken. Because that's not what this is about, and you know it. Then what is it about? He asked, almost gently, like he was baiting me. Control, I said through gritted teeth. You need everything your way, and the second you don't get it, you turn it into some sick game. Jeff only smiled wider, leaning back in his chair as if I'd just proven his point. William looked miserable, practically squirming in his seat, his eyes fixed on the untouched drink in his hands. And I could see Jeff feeding off that energy. But the worst part was when Jeff pulled out his phone. There was this stillness in the room, this eerie calm that made my skin crawl. He unlocked the screen with deliberate slowness, his thumb moving with practiced ease, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. Then he turned the phone toward us. On the screen were emails, cold, emotionless confirmations. The wedding venue. The caterers. The photographer. Even the florist. All of it, canceled. For a second, I couldn't even process what I was seeing. It felt surreal, like someone had cut the sound out of the world. He spoke so casually, as if he were mentioning something trivial. We're already done, he said, his tone flat, calm, detached, like he was reading the weather report. I blinked at him, completely stunned. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice catching in my throat. You made that clear, he said, not even looking at me. When you dismissed my feelings and told me to deal with it. There was a smugness in his voice that made me want to scream. That self-satisfied smirk on his face, it wasn't sadness, it wasn't heartbreak. It was victory. He was proud of himself. Jeff, this isn't funny, I said sharply. You actually canceled everything? The venue, the caterers? Are you insane? He just shrugged, completely unfazed. Insane would have been marrying someone who doesn't respect boundaries. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I made a mistake, okay? Maybe I should have told you about the trip sooner, maybe I should have listened more, but this... I gestured at the phone, my voice trembling. This is overkill. We can fix this. He gave that same small, condescending smile, the kind that says he's already decided I'm wrong no matter what I say. Now you want to fix it, he said quietly. Now you want to cancel the trip after all this? Because you're facing consequences, not because you understand why it was inappropriate. I stared at him in disbelief. This isn't about consequences, Jeff. This is about throwing away 3 years because you can't handle being challenged. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. No, he said, voice steady, rehearsed. This is about respect. You showed me exactly what you think of mine. It hit me then, he'd been planning this whole thing. Every word, every expression. It was like watching someone perform a script they'd practiced in the mirror until every beat landed perfectly. He had an answer for everything. Every question I threw at him, every plea I made, he countered with calm precision, like this was a debate he was determined to win. There was no emotion in him anymore, no love, no pain. Just control. Cold, deliberate control. And in that moment, it became terrifyingly clear who Jeff really was beneath all his reasonableness. Not a man who wanted understanding, but a man who wanted dominance disguised as logic. Here's the thing, I still think Jeff was being ridiculous. Yes, maybe I could have handled the Vegas trip better. Maybe I could have chosen my words differently that night at dinner. But canceling our entire wedding? Over one trip? That wasn't the reaction of someone who loved me. That was punishment, a power move. The way he'd orchestrated the whole Mira situation, pulling in Mira just to make a point, was calculated and cruel. It scared me more than I wanted to admit. Because if he could be that composed, that vengeful, while pretending to be rational, what else was he capable of? The weeks after Jeff called off the wedding were chaos. Pure, emotional chaos. At first came the anger. I called him constantly, left voicemails that ranged from furious to pleading. I sent long texts trying to make him see how absurd he was being. I even showed up at his workplace more than once, thinking maybe face to face he'd finally listen. Instead, he had security escort me out. I can still remember the stares, the whispers, the looks of pity and judgment. They probably thought I was unhinged. A desperate woman chasing after a man who'd already moved on. But I wasn't crazy. I was fighting for us, or at least what I thought us still was. When the anger didn't work, I switched tactics. I tried to reason with him. I called again, softer this time. I said we could talk, work through it, go to couples therapy if he wanted. We can fix this, Jeff, I told him over the phone. Please. Let's just set some new boundaries, talk like adults. But Jeff wasn't interested in fixing things. He was too busy playing the victim, spinning the whole situation into some tragic story where he was the poor, misunderstood fiancé who'd done everything right. He told anyone who would listen that I was controlling, dismissive, impossible to reason with. It was like he'd rewritten our entire relationship page by page, and cast himself as the martyr who had finally escaped. Friends I'd known for years started treating me differently. Whispering, exchanging glances when I walked into a room. Suddenly I was the difficult one, the selfish one. And Jeff, oh Jeff, he knew exactly how to perform it. That calm, reasonable tone of his. The fake sadness in his voice when people asked what happened. He'd sigh and say things like, I just couldn't marry someone who didn't respect my feelings. It was disgusting. Meanwhile, I was the one picking up the pieces, literally. The financial hit was brutal. Thousands gone overnight. Jeff had been in charge of most of the wedding payments, but since everything was in my name, the vendors came after me. Angry emails, phone calls, invoices piling up. The venue wanted half the balance for late cancellation. The caterer refused to refund anything. I was drowning in paperwork and humiliation. And my parents? Furious. Not just about the money, though that was bad enough, but about the embarrassment. My mom couldn't stop asking, "What did you do, Tiffany? What happened?" Every time I told her it wasn't my fault, she'd give me that look, half disbelief, half pity, like she'd already decided I must have done something terrible. "He seemed like such a good man," she'd say softly, shaking her head. My dad avoided talking about it altogether. He just grunted whenever the topic came up, the disappointment written all over his face. The humiliation didn't end there. Mutual friends, people who'd stood beside us at parties and toasted our engagement, suddenly took his side. They'd send little texts like, "We're so sorry things didn't work out," but their tone was clear. I was the one who had pushed too far. I overheard one of them at brunch say, "Jeff's such a good guy. He deserves someone who respects him." No one asked for my version. No one wanted it. It was like they'd all been waiting for an excuse to turn against me, and Jeff's little victim act gave them exactly that. And then came the part that hurt the most, watching him move on like I'd meant nothing. 3 years together, gone, erased overnight. He started posting pictures, smiling with friends, drinks in hand, captions like, "Fresh starts are underrated." There he was, laughing, traveling, glowing. It was like calling off the wedding had set him free. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my half-packed apartment, sorting through bills and unreturned deposits, while everyone whispered about how I'd driven him away. I'd scroll through social media and see the comments, "You look so happy, Jeff," or "Good for you, man, best decision ever." And every like, every heart emoji felt like a punch. I couldn't understand it. Was I really the villain for wanting to keep my friends? Was I supposed to erase every man from my life just to make my fiancé comfortable? That wasn't love. That was control. But somehow in everyone's eyes he was justified. A month after the wedding cancellation, when the noise had started to quiet, I began to notice something that made my blood boil. William had changed. He was quieter around me, careful, like every word might set off a landmine. He'd text less, cancel plans, and when we did talk he sounded guilty, overly gentle, almost rehearsed. One afternoon over coffee I tried to joke about it. "You don't have to treat me like I'm fragile, you know," I said. He gave a weak smile and said, "Yeah. I just feel bad about how everything went down. The whole Vegas trip thing. I can't help but think maybe it's my fault. Maybe if we hadn't planned it." His voice trailed off, and for the first time I saw it, the guilt, the hesitation. The way he couldn't meet my eyes. At the time I thought he just blamed himself for the Vegas trip causing problems. But then I saw them. It was a cold afternoon downtown and I just stepped into this little coffee shop I used to love, the one with the mismatched mugs and the terrible indie playlist. And there they were. Jeff and William. Sitting at a corner table, laughing. Jeff had that easy smile, the one that used to make me melt when we first started dating. William was leaning back, his arm draped over the chair like he didn't have a care in the world. They looked like old friends catching up after years apart, not two people who had completely detonated my life. For a second I thought maybe I was hallucinating. But no, the sound of Jeff's laugh, that low familiar tone, snapped everything into sharp focus. It hit me like a punch to the gut. They hadn't run into each other. No, this was planned. The way Jeff leaned in, the casual rhythm of their voices, the unforced body language, it was too familiar, too comfortable. When I finally confronted William later, I didn't even bother hiding my anger. "I saw you," I said flatly. "At the coffee shop. With Jeff." He blinked, pretending to be surprised. "All that?" "Yeah, we just ran into each other. Total coincidence." "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice shaking. "You two look like best friends. You've been talking, haven't you?" He looked away, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not what you think," he said quietly. "It's exactly what I think," I snapped. "You've been in touch since everything blew up, haven't you? You've been talking behind my back." He didn't answer right away. And that silence, that heavy, guilty silence, told me everything. That's when the truth came out, piece by piece, like a confession he'd been rehearsing. He admitted Jeff had been texting him regularly since the confrontation. Apparently, they'd been working through their issues, finding common ground. Common ground, I repeated bitterly. What, bonding over how awful I am? He winced. "It wasn't like that," he said, but the words rang hollow. We both had concerns about your behavior. About how things were affecting everyone." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "My behavior? You mean me not letting Jeff control my life?" "It's not like that," he said again, softer this time, eyes downcast. "But it was exactly like that." Listening to him talk felt like sitting through a bad therapy session. One where I was the problem, and the two of them were the poor victims trying to recover from knowing me. The language he used, boundaries, manipulation, emotional strain, it was like he was quoting Jeff word for word. Then came the part that truly broke me. William confessed that he'd been feeding Jeff information for months. All those private conversations we'd had, about Jeff's jealousy, his need to micromanage, his constant overthinking, William had been reporting everything back. Every time I vented, thinking I was safe, he'd gone straight to Jeff. Like some undercover informant. I just stood there numb. "So," I said quietly, "you've been playing both sides this whole time. Pretending to have my back while giving him ammunition." He didn't deny it. He just looked away and whispered, "I didn't mean for it to get out of hand." "Out of hand?" I said sharply. "You destroyed my life. You and Jeff both did." And that's when it finally clicked. The Vegas trip, all of it. The whole thing had been a setup. William hadn't planned that trip as a gesture of friendship. He'd planned it as a test. He wanted to see how far he could push Jeff before he broke. And when Jeff finally snapped, when he played his petty mirror game and invited Mira, William folded immediately. He threw me under the bus to save himself. Two men who were supposed to care about me, my fiancé and my best friend, had turned me into a pawn in their twisted little power struggle. And in the end, I was the only one who lost. Between us, I think they both enjoyed it. Jeff with his calculated revenge plot. William with his cowardly betrayal. It was like watching two boys find a new way to bond, by excluding the girl who dared to stand up to them. Pathetic. Cruel. And it told me exactly what they had really thought of me all along, beneath all their fake concern, their charm, their understanding. I wasn't someone they respected. I was someone to be managed, corrected, silenced. 4 months later, I was sitting in my cramped studio apartment, scrolling through social media, watching my old life move on without me. There they were again, Jeff and William, together. Smiling in photos, grabbing beers, hiking, captioning their posts with things like, "Brotherhood through chaos." They'd actually become friends. Real friends. It was sickening. Like some twisted redemption arc for them both. Two men who destroyed me, now celebrating it as personal growth. And then came the kicker. Last week, a mutual friend mentioned that Jeff was seeing someone new. Not Mira. Thankfully, even he wasn't that predictable, but someone from his office. A woman nothing like me. Quiet, polite, reserved. The kind of woman who probably nods when her boyfriend tells her what's appropriate. "She's sweet," the friend had said. "Really down to earth. The total opposite of you." That line echoed in my head for days. The total opposite of me. When I saw their pictures online, I knew exactly what he'd found. The piece of being unchallenged. She was smiling softly in every photo, tucked neatly under his arm while he looked genuinely happy. Not the forced, performative happiness he'd flaunted right after our breakup. This was real. He'd found someone who wouldn't question him, who wouldn't test his limits or ask for space. Meanwhile, I was still clawing my way out of the wreckage. My social circle had all but disappeared. My parents still whispered about the wedding disaster. And there I was, starting over completely at 26, because my ex-fiancé had decided to teach me a lesson about boundaries. What hurt most wasn't losing Jeff. It was that everyone seemed to think his actions proved him right. "See," they'd say. "He's moved on. He found someone who respects him." As if I'd been the disrespectful one. As if the problem had been me all along, my independence, my friendships, my refusal to shrink. It was the perfect story for them. Me. Easy. Palatable. The toxic fiancé, and the poor guy who escaped. And sure, maybe I could have handled things differently. Maybe I should have been more patient when he overanalyzed everything, more gentle when I brought up the Vegas trip, more cautious with William. But I didn't deserve to have my life blown apart over wanting to maintain a friendship. Jeff's reaction wasn't heartbreak. It was vengeance. And the fact that everyone applauded him for it just showed how warped people's ideas of love and loyalty really are. The truth is, I'm angry. Angry at Jeff for being a manipulative control freak. Angry at William for being a coward who hid behind friendship. Angry at everyone who took their side without even listening to mine. And angry at myself for not seeing it sooner. I should have known what kind of man I was really dealing with. Maybe then I could have saved myself the heartbreak, and the humiliation of believing I was marrying someone who actually loved and trusted me, instead of someone who just wanted a woman he could control. Love this story? Like, share, and subscribe for more epic audio adventures. Stay curious and keep listening.